Hello, my name is Mushat and I'm here today to discuss how a variety of leadership approaches may help with the management of teams that are culturally diverse within an organisation. So let's look to see if we can define what the problem is. I work as a business consultant within the financial services sector, focusing on information technology. It has been normal practice for a number of years for large financial service companies to offshore some of this effort, looking to benefit from cheaper resources and costs from companies based, for example, in India. As this practice has become more widespread and with more of the IT servicing and support work being done by offshore teams, large change programs are then required to look at the impact of change across more than one organizational culture, the onshore culture here in the UK and the offshore culture in India. So to successfully manage change programs with two culturally different teams, I need to understand what the operating differences are between these two cultures. How does each culture respond to the business needs around such factors as communication, management styles, and decision making? But first, I need to understand what factors make us culturally different. So what forms of diversity could influence organisational culture? As a foundation, I've looked to Marlon Loden's diversity wheel and found that factors such as race, national origin, ethnicity, and geographical location are all factors in determining organisational culture. So looking back at the problem of our change teams based both in the UK and in India, and taking into account Loden's cultural determination factors, I feel that I can state that I'm dealing with two distinctly different cultures. The next step is deciding how to manage these teams is to determine how culturally different the teams actually are. In order to determine how culturally different the two teams are, I need to measure them using a cultural framework model. There are, of course, many cultural framework models to reference that would provide some objectivity in defining the differences between two cultures. I could reference Trompinar's model of national cultural differences, which is a framework of cross-cultural communication, or a similar model in Hofstede's cultural dimension theory. However, in this example, I plan to use Erin Meyer's cultural map, which measures cultural differences across 8 categories, showing how cultures build trust, give feedback, and make decisions. By comparing the UK and India using this model, we can determine where the greatest variance in our cultural differences are, and then look to address those differences with specific leadership approaches. Using Mayer's cultural map, we can indeed see significant differences in how each culture operates across the measures. I look to highlight the 3 cultural features of communication, trust, and time management, as those show the most significant differences across each of the continuum measures and are likely to create issues when managing culturally separate and distinct teams. So, with regards to communication, what are the cultural differences as measured by Mayer's model that our leadership team need to be aware of? For the UK-based teams, good communication is precise, simple and clear. Messages are expressed and understood at face value, and repetition is appreciated as it helps clarify the communication. For the teams based in India, however, good communication is more sophisticated, nuanced and layered. According to Mayer, messages are both spoken and read between the lines, with some communication implied, but not plainly expressed. With this dimension and with UK-based teams, task-based trust is built through business-related activities. Work relationships are built and dropped easily based on the practicality of the situation. For India teams, trust is much more based on the relationship with each other and, according to the literature, is built through sharing emails and social time. For UK teams, the preferences according to the model is that project steps are approached sequentially, completing one task before beginning the next. One thing at a time, no interruptions, and the focus is on the deadline. For Indian teams, project steps are approached in a more fluid manner, changing tasks as opportunities arrive. Many things are dealt with at once, and interruptions are accepted. The focus here is on adaptability. So now that we've determined that there are differences in how the two teams operate, we now need to look at what leadership style would be best for each team. A leadership model is a theory on how to govern employees. These models sometimes include organisational theories in that they are at least suggestive of a type of response or style most helpful in leading a business. So can one or more of these models help us with the issue of how to manage separate and culturally distinct teams? We will unlikely find a leadership model style that will fit with how our teams score culturally on Myers dimensions. We could, for example, select a supportive democratic style leader, where the style works with the UK, but flies in the face of convention when managing the Indian team, who prefer a more autocratic approach supported by their preference for hierarchical management and a more top-down structure. Perhaps we could look to utilise a bureaucratic style leader with defined roles and responsibilities, supporting our Indian colleagues, but this may clash with the UK team's preference of being more consensual in making decisions. The trick is to look at mapping a managerial style against the cultural backdrop of a team, a company or organisation. This is what Erin Mayer created in her mapping of leadership cultures. Mayer's 4 cultures of leadership distinguishes between attitudes towards authority and decision making and maps countries across those 2 dimensions. So using this measure, our 2 teams in the UK and India are separate and distinct, clearly operating with different expectations of what leaders need to be. So for our Indian team, remember the boss is the director, not a facilitator. It's as I described, the leader is required to be autocratic and bureaucratic. And be careful what you say. You may find that a casual comment is interpreted as a decision. For the UK team, before making a decision, speak up, no matter what your status. It's a more democratic, more consensual approach. But after the decision is made, please remain flexible as decisions are rarely set in stone and most decisions can be adjusted or revised if necessary. So from this analysis, we can see that we need very different leadership style approaches to managing our teams. So what are our options? What we could look to use in this instance is the Hersey-Blanchard model or situational leadership style. Developed by Paul Hersey and Ken Blanchard, the model is not a static leadership style per se, but instead it is flexible, wherein the manager adapts their management style to various factors in the workplace, including their relationship with employees, with the manager choosing a style as it relates to their teams. Although this leadership model may be sound in theory, it may not necessarily apply in every situation and comes with its own advantages and disadvantages. One advantage of an adaptive leadership style is leaders can change their style at their own discretion at any time. So in our case, the manager flexes between styles that are supportive of each of the teams based here in the UK and abroad in India. It does, however, put too much responsibility on the manager, whose ability to manage using different styles would be limited by their experience and confidence. It also appears in the literature that the model may not apply to every work culture. So, in summary, given the significant differences in culture between the 2 teams, it is highly unlikely that the organisation would find someone with the managerial flexibility to be able to face both the UK team and the India-based team and manage both successfully. As we've seen, some of the leadership models are good models to adopt, but only when directing or managing teams of a similar culture. So if we have a culturally competent manager at the head of each team, we still have the issue of managing the manager, and the cultural differences would still exist each step up the hierarchical structure. In my opinion, it should be perhaps a consideration that some of these models are now redundant, born in an era where globalisation is related to worldwide supply chains of raw materials and goods, and not the supply of services and the issues arising from the management of culturally independent teams that came about with the globalisation of the service industry in the late 80s. Perhaps it's time to look for new ways of working and new leadership models that would support a truly global and culturally diverse workforce. Corporate rebels, Just Minar and Pim de Marie, are creators of a movement of individuals and organisations that inspire changes towards more engaging workplaces. Perhaps we find new answers in some of the pioneering practices they've seen from around the world. The flat organisation with autonomous teams currently operated by the Swedish bank Handelsbanken. The Spotify model, a people-driven, autonomous approach that emphasises the importance of culture and network. Or the creation of an ecosystem of mini-companies, similar to the Chinese consumer electronic company Haier. Joseph Rost in his book Leadership for the 21st Century, concluded that we are now seeing a paradigm shift from an industrial era to a post-industrial era, and that perhaps it's time to forsake the old paradigm and begin a new life for leadership study and practice by consciously thinking and acting in ways that are consistent with a post-industrial framework. Ross states that if academic scholars, translation specialists and practitioners can all do that and do it collaboratively, leadership studies have no place to go but up. Leadership studies itself will be transformed. I've been Will Mushat, and thank you for listening.